just taking some time to adjust the posture, feeling the connection with the ground, a sense of alignment. And exploring a sense of balance between relaxation and vigilance. So a body that can rest, that can relax, be at ease, but also with a certain tonicity, a sense of openness, uprightness, awakeness. And we'll explore doorways to get in touch with and learn to abide in the silence, the stillness. There's many ways to explore that, but the way we could share tonight would be, it's coming from a practice from the Kashmir Shaivism. And they call it the practice of centering. That is to center within stillness. So the first way to explore that is to start paying attention to the small silent gap between the exhale and the inhale. So bringing the attention to the breath, letting it flow freely, and becoming specifically interested in that small moment of pause between inhale and exhale and inhale. We're actually centering our attention in the small space where everything is still, where nothing happens. What we are actually doing is trying to look at the sky in between two clouds. The only thing we become interested in is looking at and experiencing and recognizing that which is silent and aware. We're not interested in the movement. We're not interested in the quality of the breath. We're just looking where it all stops. That's one way to do it. And another very beautiful one is to do the same thing with the space in between two thoughts. So place your attention now at the level of the mind. And then become interested not in the content of thoughts, but at the space in between two thoughts. Maybe a very small gap, or maybe by that focus the gap becomes very long. The point is not to not have any thoughts. The point is to get in touch with the background, the space in which the thought arises, the space in which the thoughts disappear. If a thought is like a bird, we're looking at the bird passing by and we're interested at the space right after the bird has gone. And right before a next bird comes. Third place, we can explore that with sounds. There's so many sounds right now. all of them come and go. And so become interested not in the sound itself. It's not interesting whether it is a nice sound or what it refers to or all of the story about the sound. But pick sounds and just look at when they end. Each of them ends. In what do they end? What becomes more and more apparent with this practice is that behind the movement of perceptions, thoughts, sounds, basically behind the movement of the world and the me, there is a background space or screen or vacant sky that is itself completely still and completely silent. So choose one of those doorways, whether it is the breath or the thought or the sound. Use any of those doorways to get in touch with the background silent space. But progressively what happens, and especially if you've had a long practice, is that is no more necessary. You don't need to pay attention to the space in between. You can just directly dive into the part of yourself which is unmoving, unperturbed, undisturbed. You recognize when you're grounded in that place by the fact that nothing disturbs that peace that you're experiencing. Everything just flows by. The sky is not disturbed by the passing by of birds. Also, everything is completely welcomed. There's no resistance. No resistance to what is here, and no expectations for something else. Now the challenge is often to remain in that place. We usually get very quickly grabbed by our thoughts and we get busy. And so a quality to develop is one of loving indifference for our inner state. Indifference because whatever happens, we're not interested. It is not relevant. But loving because it is nonetheless welcomed. We will just not engage with it, but it can be here. The metaphor I use for myself is the one of being at a movie play, at a movie theater with a little girl that you really like, that you really love, and you're watching that play together, and it's a beautiful play. But right before the end, when it becomes the most beautiful moment, the little girl pulls at your sleeves and she asks you for an ice cream. And it's not the time for an ice cream because the play is so beautiful. And at the same time, you really love her, so there's no point at yelling at her or becoming violent. So it's the same quality we develop with our own mind when it comes and tries to get us involved into a story about me, my world, and my story. You turn towards it with lots of kindness, and you very firmly explain that no, we're not interested right now. There's something so much more beautiful. So when the mind comes and gets you busy, try to cultivate this very gentle, loving and welcoming attitude and relationship. And remain lovingly disinterested. Maybe the mind comes up with very boring topics, so you're still lovingly disinterested. But maybe the mind plays it smart and comes up with some really fancy insights, revelations, and still you remain lovingly disinterested. is simply to keep turning the attention towards that silent, still presence. Now, the way I've spoken about it is actually very limited, because I implied that we have to look in between two things, or we have to go somewhere, or that it's a space that we have to go to and remain in. And all of that is really not adequate. Is the limitation of language, which makes everything sound dual. As if there is silence opposed to sounds. Or if there is movement opposed to stillness. It is a useful doorway at the beginning to release the attention that we have on movement and the world. But if we make the experiment of trying to find the end of silence and the beginning of sound, try to do that in your own experience right now. Go at that place of complete stillness within yourself. And then lean forward into sounds and thoughts, and find a place where the stillness ends and the movement starts. To have two things, we need to have a clear limit. But when we look closer, there is no limit, because there's not two things. The image here is if we're looking at clouds in the sky. From far away, it looks like we have two things, the clouds and the sky. And we can look in between two clouds to find the sky. But when we lean forward, we don't find where the cloud ends and where the sky begins. Because in truth, there's only sky. choose the practice you would like to continue in the next minutes. The first one being to pay attention for the gaps, to get in touch with that silent stillness, either through thoughts or breath or sound. The second level of practice would be to just remain resting in that silence, untouched, undisturbed, just abiding completely in unlimited peace. And the third practice would be to, from there, lean forward and see that everything arising and dissolving is actually just a movement of that same stillness. Sound is a modulation of silence. A thought is a modulation of consciousness. Not two. The movement backward, the movement that leads back to a silent, still presence, in which there is no involvement whatsoever with anything. That movement is a movement of neti-neti. Not this, not that, taking out layers one after another, peeling off the world, the story and the me, until nothing remains. there's also this other path, iti, this and this, which is the leaning forward from that space, realizing that everything is that. In the Buddhist tradition, it's the sentence of the Heart Sutra that says that emptiness is form and form is emptiness. But for a moment, forget everything that has been said. Forget about the practice. Forget that you're meditating. And just take a moment without any preconceived ideas or intent. A moment of deep resting. In Tibetan Buddhism, they speak of non-meditation. And non-meditation is that time where there is not a meditator practicing meditation anymore. And what remains is just this undefinable, ungraspable presence, which needs no intent and no story, not even a description. a very different way that Rumi speaks of it is by simply offering a suggestion of close your eyes, fall in love, and stay there. And very gently bringing the attention back to the breath. Starting to inhale and exhale a little bit more deeply. And take your time to allow the body to come back to itself and start moving and stretch. But do it slowly so you can really savor it, savor that movement.